Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Well, this is the full moon night, 29th of December, 2020. So this is the tail end of the year, the closing days, the fag end of this year. And so for myself, it's a natural time to be reflecting on ending, things coming to a conclusion, winding down. What I believe is the last Dhamma talk that Luang Por Chah gave, that was recorded and is in our collection of his teachings. It's a Dhamma talk entitled "Why Are We Here?" It was from a talk he gave at Selfcentered Monastery during the last rains retreat, when his health was good back in the early 80s. And he spoke about this quality of ending, of dissolution and decay, kaya vayang. And it's interesting that in that very talk he says, he's talking about his own body, his own health. He said everything is winding down. He said pretty soon my voice will be gone, and you won't hear from me anymore. And it turned out to be true. It turned out to be the case. And he compared our life and the living process like a block of ice melting in the sun. Kaya vayang, it's of the nature to dissolve and to decay. And that is, I feel this is a good time to reflect upon that, this ending, the last days of the year, that sense of things closing and finishing, also our activities for this year, and getting closed up for the time of our winter retreat, due to begin January the 3rd. Also, that Dhamma talk of Luang Por Chah's, why are we here? And the reflections on dissolution and decay, even though there's a natural sense of sadness, of the ending of things, old age, decay, death, even the words themselves bring a somber, depressing quality to them. Just the sounds of the words, they land in our ears and in our hearts, and there's a chilling, a cooling, a sadness that comes with that. But in that teaching and many other teachings, Luang Por would often point to how it's actually, and mysteriously, ironically, the reflections on anicca, the development of the perception of anicca, of change, of uncertainty, the anicca sanya, that even though on one level, to our worldly habits of thinking, that can be bitter and challenging, somber, that very quality is also the gateway to wisdom. It's the very heart of the development of wisdom, that understanding of the nature of change and uncertainty. Another teaching he gave on the same theme, called Dhamma nature, he gave on the occasion when one of the Western monks from Wat Pah Nanachat and his community had recently disrobed, and it was quite a disruptive, challenging event in the life of the community. He was a fairly senior monk. He was a good friend, companion of the new abbot of Wat Bananachat. And so Luang Por had come over and was giving this teaching to the community of Western monastics. And to me, this is one of the most profound and wonderful Dhamma talks in all of the many teachings that Luang Por Chah gave. Because even though it was occasioned by a sad event in the community, a sense with a natural sense of loss and those feelings of sadness, disappointment, the ending of someone's monastic life and the departure of a dear friend, that it created the occasion for this extraordinarily profound teaching, and that I've read it many times and reflected on it a lot, because in that teaching, as with the same theme that he explores in that last Dhamma talk he gave at Tham Sangpet before his own health decayed and he was unable to talk anymore, he, if I remember correctly, referred over and over again to the verses that we reflect upon, we recite and reflect upon at the death of somebody, or the funeral of someone. Anicca vata sankhara, all conditions are impermanent, are unstable. Upada vaya dhammino, upada, having arisen, vaya dhamma, they decay. Having integrated, they disintegrate. Upajitawa nirujanti, having begun, having arisen, then they end, nirujati, they come to a conclusion, they cease. Te sang upa samo sukho, and in their passing is peace, sukha, contentment, happiness. And so it's really that last line that is the aspect of this that makes all the difference, and that is really important to reflect on. I feel that because from a worldly perspective, when we are experiencing the ending of things, maybe many people are very much looking forward to 2020 coming to an end, rather than sadness and loss. There's a hooray! At last, the plague year is coming to an end. So I appreciate that. The ending of this particular year is not unwelcome for many people, but just generally reflecting on the theme of endings and closings and finishings. So why is it sukha? Why is there that quality of contentment, of happiness, of peace? Te sang upasamo sukho. In the passing of conditions, there is peace, this happiness. Now, on a worldly level, particularly with things that are dear to us, then that change, that ending of things, is frightening, is off-putting, is something that we hate, we fear. The death of someone close to us, someone leaving the community, like with a disrobing, the loss of your reputation or the loss of your faculties, not being able to see clearly, not being able to hear clearly, not being able to remember, losing your mobility, a broken friendship, someone who was dear to you and you got on well with, and then something turns the relationship sour, and that friendship, that relationship is broken, is ended. These are all things that we are afraid of, that we experience a sense of aversion towards on a worldly level. That's with most of us, and I would say as almost a universal human instinct, that quality of anicca, that sense of change, particularly with respect to things that we think of as ourselves or things that are dear to us, people, and the objects that we feel we own, the aspects of our life and our story, our reputation that we cherish. When those are challenged, we feel tense and afraid. We don't want it to go. We don't want to lose it. We don't want to be separated from what we love. And And this is extremely basic, powerful instinct. That when, particularly in instances of a parent losing a child, then it's natural to have extraordinary depth of anguish and painfulness. I remember my mother telling me how when her older brother, my uncle George, died in the Second World War. He was died in a bombing raid on London, and my grandmother was unconsolable, just howling with grief for days. She just couldn't be consoled. It was just this terrible, wrenching heartbreak. And she was not alone. That's how it's been for our human family, and particularly for parents losing their children, people losing their loved ones, or beloved parents being, say, when they pass away, that it can be the same for the children. And that there's this terrible sense of loss and grief and sadness. So this is completely natural to us. So why would the Buddha say "Te sang vupassamo sukho"? In the passing of things, there is peace. It all depends on the perspective, I would say, and that what we take to be solid, what we take to be real, what we take to be the framework for our existence, our experience of life. And that if we live from a self-centered perspective, and doesn't necessarily mean being selfish. You can be extremely unselfish, but yet still be, say, relating to the people around you, your family, your possessions, your livelihood, your work, with a profound sense of self. If you can see the difference, so that. A mother might be extremely unselfish, generous, and kind, and never thinking of herself, but be deeply attached to her children, identified with the role of the mother, and profoundly loving and bonded to the children. So I would still say that's a self-centered perspective, a worldly perspective. I'm not criticizing that. It's very natural and very much a part of our human condition. But as the Buddha pointed out over and over again, as long as the mind relates to its experience of the body and our own mind and the world around us, the people around us, as long as it relates from that position of self-view, of sakkaya ditthi, then necessarily we're creating the conditions, the causes for suffering. As long as we take the five kundas, the body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, as long as we take the five kundas as absolutely real and who and what we are, then right there we're creating the conditions for a lot of suffering. So that I would say that that suggestion or that reflection of the Buddha, "Te sang vupassamo sukho," that the passing of things can bring happiness, can bring peace, when the view is changed, when the view goes from self-view to right view, to sammaditthi, seeing things in accordance with Dhamma, in accordance with nature. And that wonderful Dhamma talk of Luang Por Chah's Dhamma nature, that's really what he's pointing to, and he says how if we look at the world around us, we see this is how life works. So, and the example he uses is of a tree with flowers growing on it. So that he said how it can be that just as a flower on a tree starts to bud, then it gets knocked off by a bird or by the wind, and even before the flower has formed, the bud is knocked off the tree. Or it can be that the flower is formed, but then it gets say broken, or it doesn't get pollinated, and so even though there's a flower, it doesn't become the cause for fruition. Or it can be that it gets fertilized, and the flower turns into a fruit. But even as a young fruit, then it gets knocked off the tree by a wind, or by a passing squirrel or a bird. Something destroys it and damages it. Or it can be that the fruit is half formed and it falls from the tree before it's fully ripe. Right. And some fruits say stay on the tree and are able to abide there until they are fully ripe, and then they fall from the tree when they reach their natural say complete potential. They've reached ripeness before they fall. And then the example he gives is exactly the same way in our human lives. Some people die in the womb, some people die just after birth, some people die when they're quite young, some people die in their middle years, some people will live until they're very, very old and will die in their later years. That's how nature is. It's not personal. It's the natural order. And so that this is the challenge, I feel. This is, in a way, the work of Dhamma practice, or practicing the Dhamma, is what we're here for. You know, us as monastics and the lay community gathered here, those who are listening to these teachings, watching this as a recording. This is the challenge of practicing the Dhamma, is of recognizing our habits of worldly thinking, our worldly perspective, the habits of self-view, sakkaya ditthi, and the ignorant and deluded, say, partial or biased ways of thinking and seeing, recognizing that, acknowledging that, and then working, practicing the Dhamma, say, studying the Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma, realizing the Dhamma, so that the view changes and that the heart, the mind is enabled to see things in terms of nature rather than in terms of self. And the more that transformation occurs, that change of view occurs, then the more the heart is open to all those changes, and it doesn't hold those changes in our world, in our own life, in the people around us, the things around us. It doesn't hold that in the same way. That the mind does not create the causes for that painfulness of loss, both with our own faculties, our own ability to hear and see and think and move and so forth, and in the relationships that we have, the work that we do, the place where we live, the buildings we occupy, the people that are near and dear to us. The heart changes its view. It changes the way that it frames those experiences, those contacts, those friendships, and that we are transforming the way that we relate, particularly to other beings, from habits of say appreciation and love based on self-view, what I would call a possessive love, or a self-based kind of loving, or what is called piya in the Pali, that creating that quality of dearness and possessiveness that is so easy and natural for us, and transforming that. And when that kind of appreciation and affiliation, closeness to others, caring for others, and feeling a sense of appreciation and gratitude for others, loving others, the more that's free of self-view, the more that naturally forms into the qualities of the four Brahma Viharas: metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, appreciative joy, and equanimity. So I would say that when the heart sees things with the eye of Dhamma, when it sees from a Dhamma-centered perspective, then the emotions that we have and the relationships that we have with each other are based on those qualities: metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha. So that, and this is what I call a liberative love, a kind of loving that liberates rather than a love that confines or binds us or limits us. And those qualities of metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha, they don't create the causes of suffering. They don't create that the roots of anguish in the same kind of a way. Or when we look at the world around us, or we look at the way that most of us habitually view life, maybe not in this community so much, but in the world around us, and historically, often what we are looking for as human beings is birth without death. Death and loss and these qualities are seen as an enemy, as a problem, and wanting to live forever. I mean, so many stories, so many kind of human endeavors have been around trying to conquer death, trying to live forever, trying to say sustain this life permanently. Maybe none of us here have had that particular idea. I would like to live forever. Perhaps you have. But if we look at the human world and the many say different societies around the world, different histories, there's been a strong impetus for that. Wanting to live forever, being afraid of death, seeing the death as the enemy, wanting to conquer death, and seeing it as sort of bad and wrong, as an unwelcome intruder. But I feel that one of the aspects of developing the anicca sanya, the perception of anicca, is that we see more and more that the idea of birth without death is impossible. It's an absurdity that if there is a birth, there's necessarily a death. I think Luang Por Sumedho would often say, when I lived here with him in the late 80s and early 90s, over and over again, when people were asking him about dealing with their own death, or that they've had a terminal diagnosis, or someone close to them was dying or had died, over and over again, Luang Por Sumedho would say, the cause of death is birth. It's not having heart disease, or it's not cancer, it's not kidney failure. It's birth. Yeah. And over again. I mean, it was he would say that with a very caring and loving attitude, and in a way that was designed and intended to be helpful to people. And so many times, kind of pretty much every time when he said that, there would be this moment where the person would go, "Oh, yes, that's right," because the attention is focused on, "Oh no, it's this a car accident that's caused the damage, or this heart disease that my husband has, or my mother has cancer, and that's the dangerous thing, or that's what killed her, that's what ended their life, or that was the cause of death." And when Luang Por would say that, it's really birth is the cause of death, and in that very moment, you can see that for most people that there will be that, at least momentarily, that shift of view, like, oh, of course, that's how it has to be. You can't have birth without death. If a thing begins, it has to end. That's the way nature operates on this worldly plane, on the conditioned plane. That's a necessary part of it. Even though, and it doesn't really make sense logically, if you spell it out, having a beginning and no ending, but that anything that we look at in the natural world, it doesn't operate that way. But somehow we feel that there must be a way that I can have birth without death, that without this thing going wrong, or this unwelcome intrusion, this thing that shouldn't be. And how can we conquer death? And so much of our sort of mythology and stories in the human family in many cultures is around this idea of conquering death. So I feel it's important to see that that death is a natural part of life. I'm not promoting murder or suicide in any way, shape, or form. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But just to see that, as Luang Por Sumedho put it, that the cause of death is birth. These are related together. And also, if we look at the living world, we look at how living systems operate, we can see that death is a necessary part of life, even in our own bodies. That when you study biology or physiology, you learn that your body needs to have certain cells dying off. If they live too long, some serious illnesses can be caused by cells of our body living too long. That many cells actually have an off switch, that they come into being, they form, and then they do their job for a certain amount of time, and then they're sort of programmed to switch off, to die. They've done their bit. They've fulfilled their function. Then they have a sort of programmed off switch, and they need that. We need that, and that, as I said, some I couldn't name exactly which illnesses. I'm not a doctor. Maybe a few medical people here could give some examples. But I know there are illnesses that we have where if those particular cells don't switch off, they keep going, then it becomes problematic. The whole system is damaged by that. So I feel it's really important to recognize that, and part of this, say, understanding of anicca and appreciation of that is to, in a way, learn how not to be afraid of death, or to see that ending of things is an intrinsic, natural, and say important part of the living process, the organic process. And there are some living systems that, when cells die, they actually make use of the dead cells, and they become an important part of the living system. Again, I'm not too up on the exact biology of it, but I think our fingernails and toenails, these are not exactly alive. They certainly don't have a blood supply or any nerves in them, and it's really handy that we can't feel anything through our fingernails. They're useful because the keratin, I think it is, of the fingernails, that it can't feel anything. It's insensitive, so we can use it to scratch with, or to dig things out, and to use as hard objects. One of the aspects of the living world that I've been fascinated with for some time was what are called slime molds. So small departure into the wonderful world of slime molds. So that a slime mold is a kind of mold, like a fungus, and most of the time it lives as sort of monocellular units. But if the living conditions where this mold is inhabiting, if the nutrients run out, or the living conditions are uncomfortable or unsupportive, then it does this. Even so, it's a plant. It's plant life, but it does this kind of miraculous thing where the cells form together into a slug-like creature. It becomes animal-like. These individual cells bond together, they form into a little slug, and then they crawl through the forest floor to find a different part of the forest where the conditions are more supportive. There's more nutrients, or the temperature is right, or the moisture is right. And then when they arrive, when this slug-like agglomeration of cells, this slug-like unit arrives at that place, and it stops, and then it turns back into a plant form, and some of the cells of this, they die off at that point, and they form into these what they call fruiting bodies. They form the stalks of these fruiting bodies. And then on the top of these, it forms a little globe with the spores inside. And then when the spores are ripened, they burst, and the spores of the slime mold then spread around that part of the forest where the conditions are ripe and supportive. So it uses the dead bodies of its own cells to form these wonderful little stalks to hold the fruiting bodies up into the air. So it needs the dead bodies of its own cells to form these handy structures for its life to continue. So and there's many things like this in nature, where the death or the ending of one part is useful, is necessary for the living. Say the living organism, the well-being of the whole organism to survive. Another slightly random example, which is also kind of even more extraordinary than the slime mold, is this particular kind of caterpillar that some of you might have come across in looking at nature books. It's as it grows, the hard, I think it's chitinous form of its head, as the caterpillar grows, then when the hard sort of carapace of its head gets too small, it'll shed that, and then it allows the body to grow bigger and the head to grow bigger. But this particular kind of caterpillar, when it sheds this exoskeleton, this kind of chitinous skull, it doesn't throw it away. It keeps it and wears it like a hat. So this is called the nickname for this particular thing is the Mad Hatterpillar, because it then, as it grows, then it collects them, and so it actually has like a stack of these heads on top of one another. You can see photographs of this. I have no idea what its proper Latin name is or its official name, but it comes from Australia, where they have many, many wonderful, extraordinary creatures, and it piles up these former skulls on top of each other. So it's rather like almost like a Dr. Seuss, like it's not the cat in the hat, it's the caterpillar in the hat. And it has like four or five of these former heads all stacked on top of each other. And not only does it wear it like a kind of decoration, but actually uses it as a defense mechanism. So if it gets attacked by predators, it can use it as a bit of a club to knock the predators away. So these sort of dead parts of its body that are somehow, cells that are no longer useful, it keeps them, and it serves as a protection, and is part of its life and its unique characteristics. So that's a small digression into biological curiosities. But I do feel that this is an extremely important area for us, because it's not just sort of death or the parts of our bodies like our fingernails or the coatings of our teeth that are insensitive, and it's useful that they're hard, or these creatures like the fruiting bodies of a slime mold, or the extra heads of the mad hatterpillar, but it's also the ego deaths, the painful losses in our life, where we've said something stupid and we've caused upset in somebody else, or we've lost something that was precious to us. We've had a project that we've launched, or we had a bright idea that people say, "Yeah, I don't like that. It's not a good idea. Well, let's not do that." Or you do that, you follow some project through and it doesn't work, and it's an expensive failure. And that feeling of being criticized, I got it wrong, people don't like me, how could I have done that? Or that was really stupid of me to say that. Now I've really spoiled that friendship. Or I meant well, but she misunderstood, and so things have gone really sour between us. And so it's those kind of deaths, what I would refer to as ego deaths, in exactly the same way, to be recognizing that we don't have to look at those as bad and wrong and unpleasant, unwelcome intrusions, but those kind of deaths, on an ordinary, say, everyday level, maybe it's even more important to be welcoming those, or to be seeing those as those kind of deaths as a natural part of our living system, and that they don't have to be seen as bad or wrong, or as something that is, shouldn't be, or creating the idea, like I was saying earlier, that having birth without death, having success and no failure, having praise and no criticism, having gain and no loss, having comfort and no discomfort, that's not the way nature works. And the more that we can really open the heart to that, and to see things with that eye of Dhamma, seeing things with from the basis of samadhi, it really changes the world. It changes the quality of our experience in the world, the way we relate to our own body, our own life, our relationships, the work we do, the place we live, and our interaction with the world around us. It changes that in a radical and a complete way, a really fundamental way. So I feel this is, say, an extraordinarily helpful area to look at, particularly because death, loss, pain, and so forth, they are naturally off-putting. We recoil. We don't even like to hear the sound of the word. It's like, as soon as you say, oh, this is going to be a Dhamma talk about loss and pain and death and grief. Oh dear, one of those. Something, even at the sound of the word, something quails and so she shuts down and doesn't want to hear it. So the encouragement of the Buddha is that te sangvupasamo sukho, in the passing of things is peace. The ending of things, there is sukha, there's happiness, there's contentment, there's peace. So it's in terms of practicing Dhamma, it's to notice that recoiling or that feeling of wrongness and badness around both physical deaths and ego deaths, all of these social deaths, all of these different kinds. To notice that, to get acquainted with that, and to not be, in a sense, to train the heart not to be intimidated by that when you feel you've done something wrong, or that there's things that are out of order. It shouldn't be this way. To turn the attention to that, to open the heart to that, to look at that feeling of wrongness or disappointment or betrayal or loss and being diminished, to look at that, to open to that. And when the eye of Dhamma is applied, when there is a seeing with that Dhamma perspective, then just as I was saying, how when Luang Por would say the cause of death is birth, we will find that at least a moment of a change of view. There's a, oh yes, of course, that arises. There's that moment of clear vision. And that when those moments arise, when that clarity is present, notice that, to really allow that to be appreciated, allow that to be fully known, because that's how we develop. We practice the Dhamma. We develop the perspective of Dhamma by recognizing that and seeing that, fully appreciating the peace and simplicity and clarity that comes in those moments where there's the, oh yes, of course, how could it be otherwise? Yeah, why was I so upset? Or yeah, why is it? Why do I call this wrong or bad? Or oh yes, to let that really be acknowledged, and then that informs our attitudes, and it creates the ground, it plants the seed, and creates a basis for the further development of that quality of right view. Now this, so I was saying how the idea of birth without death is an absurdity, is kind of ridiculous. But this place is called the Deathless Realm. So Amaravati literally means the Deathless Realm. My name, Amaro, means deathless. So how does that work? And again, I feel this is a useful area to reflect upon. That when we talk about deathlessness, it's not the same as denying death. It's not the same as sort of attaching to life and denying death, which I would say is as absurd and as productive of dukkha as the idea of birth without death, or living forever, being me forever, living forever. That to contemplate, what do we mean by the deathless and the deathless realm? So sometimes people hear a name like this, Amaravati, the Deathless Realm, and look upon it as some kind of a denial of death, or just some kind of positive affirmation, and just a kind of foolish idealism. But I feel if we bring attention to this and look at the Buddha's teaching and the mythology of the Buddha's life, then it points very directly to how deathlessness is not a denial of death, but rather it's a transcendence of it. I realize that English is not the first language of most people here, but to deny death is to, in a sense, to contend against it, to fight against it, to suppress it, or to make it into an enemy. To transcend death is to see it in a different way, to see a broader view, as to see the nature of things in a more profound and complete way. So, for example, the story of the Buddha's enlightenment, we have in the scriptures and the commentaries, the mythology of Buddhism. We have the stories of the Buddha sitting down, or the Bodhisattva sitting down under the Bodhi tree and making the resolution, I'm not going to move from this spot. May my bones turn to dust, may my blood dry up, but I will not move from this spot until full and complete enlightenment has been realized. And then the Bodhisattva sitting down with that resolution, that adhitthana, commitment, then this brought forth the forces of Mara. And Mara literally means death. That's like Amaravati, Amara, deathless. Mara is death. My name, Amaro, deathless. So Mara, it's right there in the name. It's the embodiment of death. So when Mara and Mara's forces come to challenge the Bodhisattva under the Bodhi tree, then, as we know, that the Buddha didn't fight with Mara. It's sometimes called the battle with Mara, but I think that's a misnomer. It's a wrong way of describing it, because the Buddha wasn't fighting the Bodhisattva. It wasn't a fight. The Mara was conquered, but it was not a contention. If you can see the difference between that. The Buddha's called Jina, the conqueror, but that conquest, that defeat of Mara, was through the quality of non-contention, and rather it was through the quality of understanding. And as it often it says in the scriptures, not just there in the stories of the Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, but other times when Mara comes along to try and fool the Buddha, delude the Buddha, or tempt the Buddha, or threaten the Buddha, then often the Buddha's response is, I know you, evil one. I know who you are. I know what this is. I know you, Mara. I know what this is. And so I feel it's part of the mythology, but I feel it carries a very important message, and that rather than death being an enemy or something that needs to be fought against or destroyed, it's not that the Buddha didn't destroy Mara, but rather Mara was defeated by the Buddha understanding what Mara is, what death is. And that Mara became powerless to have any influence, to harm or to tempt or to challenge the Buddha through the awakened understanding that arose in the heart of the Buddha with his enlightenment, and that Mara was swept away on the current of hair from the goddess Dharani, the earth goddess who rose up to be the witness for the Buddha. So these are symbolic stories, but I feel it carries an important message, and that in our practice, it's the understanding of birth and death, beginnings and endings, of how anicca is pervasive, that and the non-identification with the five kundas, and that comes with the true appreciation of anicca, with vipassana meditation, insight meditation. Then we use that very tool, the appreciation of the quality of change and uncertainty. We reflect every aspect of the experiential world. What we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, and feel is in a state of change. there's a reflection on dukkha, that every aspect of that experiential field is incapable of satisfying completely and permanently. All things are dukkha. So be sankhara, dukkha, all things are necessarily unsatisfactory. They can't please or complete in a permanent way. They are dukkha. They are unsatisfactory, and they are anatta. They're not self. They're not who and what we are. They're not a self. They don't belong to a self. They are empty of self, void of self. So that the development of insight then frees that quality of knowing, of awareness, from identification with the five khandhas. And so this, as people who are living here at Amaravati and practicing meditation, practicing concentration, insight, samatha, and vipassana, everyone who lives here knows this is really the essence, the heart core of insight meditation and the development of wisdom. And the result of that development, its fruition, is the freeing of the heart from identification with the five khandhas. So when the mind is awake and clear and fully, attuned to the flow of experience, of perceptions, then it knows that all sankharas, what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, and feel, arises and passes away. It's not self. It doesn't belong to a self. It's in a constant state of transformation, of transmutation. It's in a constant state of change. It's anicca, dukkha, and anatta. So the heart, through that clear seeing, that vipassana, seeing inwardly, seeing clearly, then that habits of identification with the five khandhas is dropped. And so there's a quality of freedom and ease, a quality of peacefulness that comes with that non-identification. So that's how death is transcended, as rather than denying endings and death and loss and so forth. Death is transcended by the recognition of that which knows the birth and death is not tied to birth and death. That which is aware of the beginnings and endings is not limited by those beginnings and endings. It's aware of them, it knows them, it's not bound by them, it's not identified with them. It's awake, it's aware, and boundless. So in this respect, there are a number of teachings I like to refer to, and I feel these are really useful and beneficial to get acquainted with. So the teaching of the Buddha to Vacchagotta in the Vacchagotta and Fire Sutta, the Agi Vacchagotta Sutta, number 72 of the middle-length discourses, the Agi Vacchagotta Sutta. And when Vacchagotta has been asking the Buddha what happens to an enlightened being at the death of the body, do they reappear? Do they not reappear? Do they both reappear and not reappear? Do they neither reappear nor not reappear? Then the Buddha points out to Vacchagotta, you're asking the question in the wrong way. You're asking a question that presumes a reality that doesn't exist yet. That reappears doesn't apply, does not reappear does not apply. Both reappears and doesn't reappear, that doesn't apply. And neither reappears nor not reappears. That doesn't apply. And then he gives this symbol of a fire going out. He said, if we had a little fire burning here, and I said, and we let the fire go out. If I ask you the question, where did the fire go? North, south, east, or west? How would you reply? And then Vacchagotta says, well, Venerable Sir, I'd say that the question doesn't apply. It didn't go north, south, east, or west. Direction doesn't apply. It just went out. And the Buddha said, exactly. You're asking a question that presumes a reality that doesn't exist in exactly the same way. Where doesn't apply. Reappears doesn't apply. The way you ask the question, where do they go? That going doesn't apply, they doesn't apply, and awareness doesn't apply. Time, individuality, and location don't apply. And then, as I like to refer to, then the Buddha speaks to Vacchagotta, describing his own subjective experience or his own perspective, and he says, one trying to describe the Tathagata in terms of form. They're unable to do that. If you try to describe the Tathagata in terms of rupa, vedana, sanya, sankhara, vijnana, that they fail to do that. They can't do that. So one who is trying to describe the Tathagata in terms of form, they cannot do that, because that whereby the Tathagata is, say, defined, is nothing to do with form, feeling, perception, mental formations, or consciousness. So, but here, the Tathagata, that rupa, that material form, the Tathagata has cut it off at the root, made it like a palm tree stump, deprived it of the conditions for existence, and rendered it incapable of arising in the future. So there's no connection of that awake, aware mind to rupa. There's no identification. The body is still there. There's a conversation between the two of them. There's Vajragota sitting there, and the Buddha is sitting there. But he's saying you can't define the Tathagata in terms of the body, or one trying to describe the Tathagata who would try to describe him in terms of feeling, of vedana, of sanya, of perception, sankhara, mental formations, or consciousness. None of that applies. And then he goes on to say the Tathagata is liberated from being reckoned in terms of a form, feeling, a perception, mental formations, consciousness. He is profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. So that there's the Buddha sitting there face to face with Vajragota, and he's saying you can't define what this is in terms of the five kundas. So, and I feel, even though that's a story from the scriptures, that's also describing exactly the awake, aware mind. Say, when we're practicing vipassana meditation, when the mind is awake, or in this moment, here as we are, so have the perception of sitting in the temple or wherever one is sitting to listen and watch this talk, that which is aware of seeing, the shapes of the temple, the pillars and the beams and the space, the people, the floor, the camera, the microphone, that which is aware of the forms, and then perceptions of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. It's present, it's aware, it knows, but it's pointing out how when that awareness is free of any kind of bias, free of attachment to self, free of ignorance, then that awareness, that knowing, is profound, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the great ocean. It's present, but you can't define what that is in terms of the five khandhas of form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. So I feel this is an extremely important and helpful teaching. Similarly, when the Buddha has a dialogue with Anuruddha, which is in the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses, and Anuruddha has had a similar conversation with some wanderers of a different sect. They've asked him, what does your teacher say about what happens to an enlightened being at the death of the body? Then Anuruddha said, well, whether they reappear, don't reappear, and so on. And Anuruddha says that, well, the Tathagata, the Buddha, describes the nature of one as something apart from those four possibilities. And the exact way that Anuruddha phrased it, the Buddha corrects him on and says, well, that's not, the way you phrased it is not quite correct, because it's saying like there's some kind of other place, or that he doesn't spell it out in detail, but he points out that the way Anuruddha phrased it was, say, indicating that there's still a sort of a defined being that is going to some place that is just not within the scope of what you described, but it still gives a hint of some kind of form or identity. And then the Buddha has this very powerful and interesting dialogue with Anuruddha, and he says, "So, can you define the Tathagata as being in the five khandhas? Can you define the Tathagata as being apart from the five khandhas. And then Anuruddha says, no, you can't. You can't say the Tathagata is in the five khandhas or outside the five khandhas. Can you? Then the Buddha says, so can you say that the Tathagata is the five khandhas or is not the five khandhas? He says, no, you can't say he is the five khandhas or he is not the five khandhas. Can you say that the Tathagata has the five khandhas or doesn't have the five khandhas? And then Anuruddha says, no, you can't say that either. And then the Buddha points out, so even as the Tathagata is sitting here face to face with you, it's the case that the Tathagata cannot be defined in terms of the five khandhas, in terms of form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness. And so if the Tathagata is unapprehendable here and now by you, even as he's sitting face to face with you, how much more so after the death of the body? And then he says, if I remember correctly, I haven't looked at this for a while, but if I remember correctly, he then says, Anuruddha, what I teach now as formally is suffering and the end of suffering. So that when we talk about deathlessness and say transcending death, then it's to do with this quality of awakening, the awake, aware mind. And when it lets go of the time-bound and the born and the dying, then what it awakens to is the unborn, the unoriginated, the uncreated, the unformed, the ajata, abhuta, and so forth. And that the verse from the Udana that we often recite, that's what is awakened to, the unborn, the unoriginated, the uncreated, the unformed. The deathless. So that that is a dimension of our being that has always been here, but because of the preoccupation of the mind with the born and the dying and our lives, our stories, our bodies, our personalities, the people around us, our living situation, then all of the 10,000 million distractions since birth, then we don't notice that. We are not aware of that. Because of the compelling nature of the born, the created, the originated, the formed, we don't notice the unborn, the unoriginated, the uncreated, the unformed. But the purpose of meditation, and particularly vipassana meditation, is precisely letting go of the born, the created, the formed, so that the unborn, the uncreated, the deathless can be realized. And so that is how death is conquered, or transcended, is by discovering that deeper dimension of the citta, this very heart, this mind of ours, that's always been here, but we haven't been aware of, or haven't made use of, or haven't acknowledged because of the preoccupation with the born, the originated, the created, and the formed. So we miss it. Like Lumpur Sumedho would often say, the most important thing is the space in the room, but we don't notice the space because our attention goes to the people. The people are interesting. They have names, they have stories, they have, a background of our connection with them. The space between Tanarindo and Tanmanunyo is not as interesting. The people are interesting. The space between is not interesting. It doesn't grab the attention. But as Lumpur Sumedho would often say, it's that the space is the most important thing, because without the space, none of us could be in this building in the first place. So that awakening to the deathless, the unborn, the unoriginated, uncreated, it's like noticing space. It's always been here. It's the most important quality, but we miss it because of the attention going to the interesting objects, the people and things, the past and the future, the responsibilities, the successes and failures that we all experience. And because of that distraction, we miss that quality. But the way that say death and loss and dukkha, that is transcended, as the Buddha said to Anuruddha, I teach suffering and the ending of suffering, dukkha and the ending of dukkha. The way that ending of dukkha is truly realized is through that awakening of the heart to its own nature as the unborn, unoriginated, uncreated, unformed. That has been the nature of the Dhamma, the fundamental quality of the real. That's always been the case, but that timeless reality has been missed because of the attention being caught by the time bound. Now, all of that can, when I speak in these ways, and I quote these kind of these suttas or talk about this area, it can seem very spacey and remote, and this sort of metaphysical quality, the unborn, unoriginated, the deathless, it can sound like it's really sort of, beyond the scope or of ordinary everyday activities. It's all very well to talk about the deathless, Ajahn, but I'm on the washing up tomorrow, or we've got the Bhikkhu Samanera meeting. We've got a lot of matters to discuss. We've got a building committee meeting tomorrow morning. Haven't got time to think about the deathless because of our agenda for the building committee meeting tomorrow morning, and so it can seem sometimes in the way that we address these areas, talk about them, that it's some sort of, when the mind focuses on these qualities or attends to these transcendent qualities, that there's some kind of dissociation or disconnect, or it's like you're unplugging from the sense world. And so that if you're not identifying with the five kundas, then it can sound like, whoa, the balloon is going off into the stratosphere. But I feel, again, looking at the story of the Buddha's life and the effect of the Buddha's enlightenment, again, I feel it's a really powerful myth. It's a powerful story for us, because when the Buddha was enlightened, the effect of his that quality of transcendence and not being able to be defined in terms of the body or feelings, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness, rather than that resulting in a being who was so disconnected, dissociated, or say out of connection or out of sync with the practicalities of life. The very fact that we're here, that this group of human beings are gathered in this spot with our robes and our shaved head, and this is the full moon day of our observance, the very fact that we're here is because the Buddha, following his enlightenment, engaged with the material world and society in extremely practical and effective ways. 2,600 years after the Buddha's enlightenment, his teaching is alive in the world. We're wearing the same clothes that the Buddha was wearing. We shave our heads in the same way that the Buddha and his disciples. These forms and these teachings are carrying on because of the Buddha's incredible attunement to the practicalities of the world and of living, and particularly his engagement with the world was based on compassion. It was the Brahma Sahampati coming to the Buddha and saying, please, out of compassion for those with a little dust in their eyes, anukampimang pajang, as Anagarika, Michael, I think it's Michael back there. Yeah, thank you. In the request for the Dhamma talk, that out of compassion for the beings with just a little bit of dust in their eyes, please share your understanding. And so that the effect of that realization of the Buddha, that and that radical letting go, that the bridge between the quality of awakened awareness and the five khandhas, that's kind of, there's no attachment, no identification, cut off at the root, made like a palm tree stump, deprived of the conditions for existence, and rendered incapable of arising in the future. There's no identification, there's no grasping, no attachment, but total attunement, and that is based on compassion, and so the effect of that radical letting go of the world, of the five khandhas, was an extraordinary attunement to the five khandhas and a motivation out of compassion to do what could be done with the conditions of the world, with things that could be said, things that could be done, structures that could be set up, like the Sangha and the Dhamma teachings, in order to help other living beings to come to the ending of suffering. And so I feel that's also important to reflect on when we talk about the deathless or the unborn or the unconditioned. It's not spacey. It's not some kind of dissociation or something that severs the mind from the practical realities of the body and the living world and responsibilities. Things like the building committee meeting and the Bhikkhu Seminary meeting and the sort of looking after the health of our bodies. Not at all. Rather, the more completely the deathless is realized, the more that this life is able to be attuned to the born and the dying, to the living and changing world. It's mysterious how that works, but that is how it functions. There is the result of that radical non-attachment, of that the bridge of identification being down. That bridge is broken and gone. That the identification with the body and the personality and the living world, that grasping of it, identification with it is gone. But the result of that is an extraordinary, comprehensive, complete attunement and an attitude of compassionate service. That's the effect of that radical letting go. So that letting go of the world and letting go of the five kundas, the result of that is the compassionate motivation and an attunement to the people and things around us. So I offer these thoughts for consideration this evening.